and welcome back to Logan Sounds Off. Today I'm going to be speaking to one of the most iconic British punks out there, Steve Diggle. Steve, how are you keeping?
Good, thanks Logan, nice to be here. We've done 3 dates in Ireland and then tonight it's Dublin, so we're having a good tour.
Fantastic, and I hope you really enjoyed the gig, and thank you so much for joining me here on Logan Sounds Off. But before we get into the interview, I just wanted to ask, for those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, many years ago, in fact 1976, we formed a band called the Buzzcocks. The landscape was barren, there was no exciting music around those, about 1976. So we'd heard about a band called the Sex Pistols, and then so we formed our band. We actually brought the Sex Pistols to Manchester and opened up for them, and that kind of put us on the map. All the journalists, all the music papers came to review the Sex Pistols, and I thought, lo and behold, there's a band from Manchester, So that kind of shocked them and put us on the map. So we were there right at the beginning of British punk, and then of course there was I think we started 2 days before the Clash, and there was the Jam and the Damned, and that was the nucleus of sort of punk rock in 1976. So we opened up and away we went from there.
And the story only gets better from there, and it's fantastic though to see you guys at the forefront of punk. And just before even we get into all of that, as you mentioned there, in Manchester, you were, I believe when you were smaller, you were listening to bands like the Beatles, you were listening to Bob Dylan. So take us back to your childhood. What kind of records were in your house? What were you hearing on the radio that was kind of impacting you at that time?
Well, yeah, I was kind of a child of the 60s, really. I mean, my cousin had Elvis Presley records. He had Little Richard and Chuck Berry and that kind of thing. It was like the 50s rock and roll people. So I would hear that, and but then when I was 7 years old, the Beatles brought the first single out, and so that sort of changed the whole thing, really. Before you know it, then you had like the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Who, all these people. So all these and of course Bob Dylan. So all these 60s records were coming up as I was growing up, from 7 years old, growing up and listening to all these records, all during the 60s. So that had a massive influence, it was all there really. So, that's what really created all my interest in music, Also, when I was about 10 years old, there was things called Tamra Motown, the Motown soul records and things like that. So I suppose by the sort of 60s groups, you thought, what's this thing called soul? And so you check that out as well. Incidentally, last year I finally made it to Tamra Motown studio where they recorded all these records, in Detroit. And I couldn't believe it. I thought as a kid, listening to all these records. I tried to get there many times when we played Detroit, but it was always closed on a Monday for some reason. We always seemed to play on a Sunday. So this time, last year, I was actually in that studio. So that was a great one, to be there. And brought me back to my teenage years, or even younger, listening to the Motown records, as well as all the 60s groups,
That's really, really awesome. And even with that kind of mix of, as you said, with a bit of soul and that Motown influence, as well as a lot of the very cool 60s music coming out at the time, with that, you were coming into a very interesting time, as you mentioned in the introduction, with your manager, Malcolm McLaren, introducing you to Pete Shelley, which was the introduction to the Buzzcocks. Could you take us back to that time?
Yeah, well, he was the Sex Pistols manager, yes. So I was at home writing songs. Incidentally, I had this song Fast Cars and some other songs, and I thought, I need a group, I need to be playing with a group. I went through with a couple of guys around the corner, but they didn't really mean it. So I thought I phoned somebody out of the newspaper just to join a band, anything. So that's what I did. So I arranged to meet somebody outside the Lesser Freeshade Hall. And as I'm waiting, this guy comes out in an old leather suit like the 1967 Elvis comeback tour. And it was Malcolm McLaren. He said, "They're in here, the Sex Pistols." I said, "I know, but I'm waiting to meet someone forming a band." And he said, "No, they're inside." So he took me inside. I thought, I don't know anything about this, but Pete Shelley was collecting tickets on the door. So I said hello to him and I said, "I'll see you in the bar and we'll have a chat about this group, you know." But I thought, I don't remember arranging to meet somebody inside this place, you know. So we had a talk there, and in the bar, slightly at cross purposes, because they was waiting to meet somebody else. And so the person I was supposed to meet, the person they were supposed to meet, they're probably still outside to this day. Someone needs to tell them it's not happening for them. So me and Pete Shelley watched the Sex Pistols at Lesser Freeshade Hall. Right at the back, there was rows and rows of empty seats. You know, that first gig was, I think there's only about 20 people there. There was hardly anybody there. But we sat at the back discussing this thing called Buzzcocks, you know. And of course, when the Sex Pistols came out, there was kind of, you know, bright orange hair and all these outrageous clothes. At the time, it was like quite shocking. And they just got on the stage and played. They didn't give, you know, they didn't care what the audience felt. And that was kind of refreshing, you know. It was like, wow, they don't care about what the audience thinks. Because before that, it was all a bit like musicians going, "Look, I can play this and I can do that." And all a little bit, you know, self-indulgent in a way.
Yeah.
Still great, but you needed some excitement, you know. By this time, it's coming up to 20 years old. So he saw the Sex Pistols, like, that's it, that's what we want to be doing. But even before I actually saw them, I was thinking about the 3-minute songs and people like The Who that used to smash the gear on the stage and tell the audience to fuck off, you know. So that was kind of like a prick. That's what it was in my mind. So when I saw the Sex Pistols, I thought, that's it all makes sense now, you know. So you've kind of got to have a catalyst, and that sort of kick-started the whole thing, particularly in Manchester and for us, you know. Because 3 weeks later, we brought the Sex Pistols back and we opened up for them, and that put us on the map, you know. And people were shocked that, oh, it's a local band, Buzzcocks, you know, because they all thought it was London-based, so they saw us, you know. Which kind of kick-started the Manchester scene as well, really, from other bands, you know.
And that momentum really built significantly after that, where I'd love to speak about another music in a different kitchen, because that album as well really, for those who didn't know you, knew you after that, because that was such an impactful album. Could you take us kind of, when you were in the studio, what kind of energy was there from playing live to now being in the studio, recording a record?
Well, we'd played quite a few shows, quite a few gigs before we recorded that first album, No Music in a Different Kitchen. So quite a few of those songs were well rehearsed on the road, you know. It's quite often that happens a lot with most bands, you know, that your first album, you've been playing a lot of the songs around. So when we went in the studio, which is a place called Olympic Studio in Barnes in London, but it's now not there, but it's a legendary place. We set up all the gear up in this, it's a huge room. You could have an orchestra in there. And you will see it on the front, there's a picture of it on the front of Singles Going Steady. And so these little lamps and a drum kit in the middle of this big room, you know. And we had these H&H amps, which were, people at the time, the local records store said, "Oh, you want to get the Marshalls, or why are you getting these cheap little H&H things, you know?" But we kind of liked them. And they had a unique sound on that first album, you know. So what we'd do, we'd go and we'd do 3 songs. We'd do one song, we'd do 3 times. pick the best backing track, then we'd put the riffs on, and then the vocals. So it was all very quick, and something about it was still, it still had that live feel. So you kind of got the performance of a live gig with the polish of the studio, you know. But also, that, compared to the Sex Pistols album, which was quite linear and great, you know, full on sort of punk rock and roll, and even the Clash's first album, apart from one reggae song on it, is quite full on, quite linear, straightforward. Our record, it had a few experimental bits, because we was into a bit of avant-garde thing as well, you know, and we'd been listening to German krautrock music, people like Kahn and Neu and stuff like that, and we like this discordant sense of things in the music as well. So we'd have a pop song with like some awkward discordant chords here and there, you know. But you know, I mean, we had well, Fast Cars on there, you know, which is the song I wrote home, which is the first song on the album, and Pete had I Don't Mind, which is a catchy kind of, you know, poppy song. Yeah. But then I had this song called Autonomy, which I was trying to be a German singing English, although being a sort of Englishman trying to be a German singing English. I was 20 years old, I don't know how I got to that place, but so I'm kind of going like, I want you, Mother Sky, or something like that. But that got me to the place of the song. That's the only song I've kind of done. And also, because I thought we need some avant-garde bits, I just went straight down the neck with the chords, you know. I just went, you know, sort of non-thinking, you know, because normally you learn chords and sequences. I just went like, such an obvious thing. I don't know where that came from, but it was like, it was the non-thinking in a way, you know.
Yeah,
it's like,
that made it work.
Look at it, you know, in an experimental approach, you know, look at it differently. Don't even think about it, you should be just...
And that's what rubs off Mary on the listeners. Don't think about it too hard. It just sounds good as it is.
Yeah, and because I was like free thinking, and, you know, I just went, oh, just do that. And it's like, wow, that sounded all right, you know. And then I had a sort of forward riff, going up that way as well. But nobody was doing that in the punk days, in those early days, this kind of stuff. And I think Johnny Marr loves that riff. Johnny Marr from the Smiths said he bought that first album. Somebody sent me a link of something, and he said, I took the afternoon off school, bought the first album, and when they heard the riff to Autonomy, he said that was like the new call for Manchester, you know. So that's a great compliment, and interesting song on that album. Also on that album we had Fiction Romance, which is another kind of, in that kind of, from Autonomy we got to Fiction Romance, and that felt a bit like sort of experimental, if you like, or a bit different from just a regular song. And Pete said to me, I've got this E chord, and I just put one note, went so this that's all I did on that song, that one note. But without that one note on that song, it won't work, you know. So there's bits like that on Fiction Romance, and then another one at the end of that album called Moving Away from the Pulse Beat, which was kind of
very experimental.
Very experimental.
Had kind of a fast cars nearly tied at the end.
Yeah, and it kind of had like that sort of Bo Diddley beat, but it had something else. John Marr, the drummer, was great. And Pete was playing the chords, and I couldn't hear most of them. I said, don't bother with that, I'll just play this. So I made all the guitar lines up, which is quite the catchy riff. So the chemistry of us all on that one was quite amazing, really. It's like, couldn't quite hear each other and know what was doing at the beginning of that song, but it formalised over a little period of time, you know. It's like, yeah, that song. And I weren't out guitar. In fact, when we always used to, the legendary DJ John Peel, we did a few sessions, and we always did two we knew, and then one we didn't know properly. You know what I mean? Just as part of the fun, and then we did Moving Away from the Post, but it was still new. We hadn't actually recorded it, I don't think, for the album yet. So I can hear myself going up and down playing the solos, still working it out. You know, by the time we recorded it for the album, I knew what I was doing. Well, not when I can hear myself sliding up, going, yeah. But that was part of the thing of the John Peel thing. So overall, going back to the album, I think that was quite pivotal and important to us. You know, it was hugely different. It was kind of like futuristic punk, if you like, that album.
Yeah, it was very, very different, and you guys really brought the melody to punk instead of it being just the kind of cliche punk idea. You guys brought it to a whole new aspect.
Yeah.
It was really, really awesome.
Yeah, there was kind of like we say, the experimental bit, the odd bit, but the melody and the tune. And also the words were a little bit sort of existential or...
Very different.
It was very different, you know, and I don't know, it's like poetry or whether it's... But we're singing about the human condition as well, so people could relate to the words as well, that was the thing.
And it made an impact.
Yeah. It was accessible but quite complex in its simplicity and its way, you know what I mean?
That's what makes it such a great album.
Yeah.
And as well, then, it wasn't just you guys who thought the record was great. Many critics now are saying with a lot of albums, they kind of are always saying, oh, it's one of the best punk albums ever. It's one of my favourite punk albums. But even then, people were instantly recognising the true power of that record.
Yeah.
Were you surprised seeing that, or were you kind of going, I knew this would happen?
Well, not really. We didn't know what to expect, but it was kind of like when we got in the room and Peter had the song or I had a song, or we all had things together. It was just like, oh, that's good, you know, that's interesting. But we never actually sat down and sort of calculated a record or something or planned it all out. It was kind of like, it just sort of came together. I think there's moments in time in life where things just happen. Obviously, we was pointing ourselves in certain direction, but it just naturally evolved, you know. It was like, and like I say, like with, you know, I knew I had Fast Cars, and I thought, I don't want to do Fast Cars Part 2, and I come up with Autonomy, and Pete come up with Fiction Romance. These things were evolving. It's like, well, let's try something else, let's try this. But we didn't know the power of that record. It was only, I think it was years later, really. We knew it was good, but it was like a few years later you kind of realised that how important it was, that record, looking back, because there was nothing like that around, you know. And I think that led the way to bands that became later what they call post-punk bands and all this. That was it, you know. That must have been an inspiration to them. It's like, with this punk thing, you can also take it into these areas, you know.
You guys really introduced taking punk to the next level.
Yeah.
And as well, with Love Bites,
Yeah.
as well. Also though, I'd love to just speak to you about Singles Going Steady, which is labelled as a compilation, but I would think as a guidebook for the modern punk. I mean, with the amount of experimentation on that. But I want to ask, for early in your career, what inspired you guys to make a compilation of all the singles to release?
Well, it was just a case of necessity, really. We did about... we were touring a lot in Britain and Europe, and we'd done about 8 of those Top of the Pops, I think, at the time. So we had quite a few of those things off Singles Going Steady were in the British charts. So America kept asking us to go over, but we was like 2 years, I think, before we... or a long time. I think it was getting on towards 2 years before we went to America. We kept saying, well, you know, when are the Buzzcocks coming to America and stuff? So by the time we did, we signed to a label called IRS, which was sort of owned by a guy called Miles Copeland, who was managing the Police. And it went to A&M Records, but it was his label, IRS. And he said, if you guys are coming over, we've got to bring the American audience up to date. So you've had all those hits in Britain. and they don't know about them. They've not had anything there, and so that's how Singles Going Steady came about. It was kind of a potted history of what we've been doing in Britain and Europe, you know. But that was our first release in America, and people, you know, quite often they think that's your first record, you know. By the time that was released in America, I think I think Love Bites was out by then, the second album over here, so they kind of backtracked, you know. But so it was like that, really. It was like out of necessity. But at the same time, looking back, it was a great thing to happen, really. You know, sometimes these things happen by accidents or whatever, for other reasons, rather than you wouldn't have dreamed of thinking, let's put that out as our first album, you know. But when you put it together, it's a great collection of singles.
Oh, it's fantastic.
The only thing I think is, it is a masterclass in punk singles, and there's still some, you know, it's like Noise and Noise, which is weird as well, but it's still poppy like a single. And other one. But the only thing is, I would say, is they missed out on the first album we was talking about, another music in a different kitchen, you know. I mean, they thought, oh, you guys are the singles band. It's like, no, you don't understand. We do make singles, but there's this other side. And so it took them a while to catch up a little bit, you know.
But Singles Going Steady really is another one of my favourite punk albums, especially tracks like Something's Gone Wrong Again, which I discovered recently. I absolutely loved that track. You know, my dad really enjoyed that. And then as well, you had a different kind of tension. But with Trade Test Transmissions, this was the first time you guys were returning in nearly a decade to getting back into the studio. When you came in, was it the same Buzzcocks mindset, kind of making punk music with a little bit of a different side, or were you going in kind of trying to change up the sound a little bit with the new gigs and shows?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we had a different kind of tension. So we had like the main first three albums, another music in a different kitchen, Love Bites, Singles Going Steady, and a different kind of tension. So like the classic three and the singles one. And incidentally, there's some of them, the singles, like Harmony in My Head, Promises, and other ones, weren't on the albums. We didn't put them on the albums. It's like, let's give people value from, let's have a single and then, you know, do the album. By the time we got to that point, I mean, we'd kind of split up. And when we got back together, I think that was the first one, was Trade Test Transmissions. So we'd been doing our own. I had my band Flight Convenience for about 8 years, really. I think Pete was doing his solo thing and all that. So when we got back, that was the first thing, there was Trade Test Transmission. So, but the world had changed a bit then. You had a lot of dance music, it was all kinds of things. And you changed as a person, your mindset. And I think, well, you know, people had mobile phones and computers then. Those earlier records, nobody had a phone or anything like that, you know.
The world had changed.
It's kind of weird, yeah.
So had the Buzzcocks.
And so, you can only do things in a certain time with certain world influences and how you're thinking at that time. There's all these things.
It's all.
And you can't really, you know, you can kind of pretend to go back or try and be what you were then, but there's no point in that. You almost don't want to be as well. It's difficult to think, why would you? You've got to see what's on. So the nature of the band became something else, you know. So Trade Test Transmission, for a lot of Buzzcocks fans, they love that as well, you know. If you're on the journey, it's different, yeah. It was no longer that Buzzcocks you knew from there, but that's how it goes, you know. That early explosive, the first 5 years were amazing, and then you get back, and then you're a different band, a different mindset. But I think we explored a lot of other things on there, you know. We tried to. Punk wasn't the same then, you know. So
it had changed.
We just concentrate more on the songs and the idea of punk and stuff, because it wasn't there. also there's certain things about punk that was, well, there was some punk going, oh, you can't do that because that's not punk. And it's like, hold on, we made half the rules, now you're telling us the rules, you know.
Exactly.
All that kind of stuff.
Parts of punk and nearly fizzled out, but
Yeah.
what I love about that record was you guys weren't writing and thinking, oh, we have to keep that punk sound, you were going, we have to keep the Buzzcocks sound.
Yeah.
And that's what really makes that album.
Yeah, it's like, let's just make an album of where we're at now. And I think there's some really good songs on that, and it was a different mindset, like you're saying. And it was kind of funny, I think we was looking for a title, and I think it was a magazine, is it, you know, the old test card thing. There used to be a test card on BBC Two where the legendary sort of iconic little thing when there's no programmes on. And that was to test all the colours for the, you know, for the engineers in the studio. So we called it Trade Test Transmission, you know, the trade test card. But
it's such an organic kind of title.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And that kind of cool album art as well.
And it's a great album now. We just started playing Isolation off that album.
Oh yeah, Isolation, yeah.
And people love that song, and we used to play it here and there, and somebody just asked me recently to play it. So for the last few gigs, and a few months back, I sort of started playing it again, but not played it for years, you know. And there's a lot of other great tracks on there that I kind of think must explore them again, you know.
Yeah, and me personally, like as a Buzzcocks fan, I wasn't too familiar with trade test transmissions, but when I discovered it and kind of found those new tracks, it was like, to me, it was really into the early stages and classic. It was cool for me to see a different side of you guys, and that really continued for you guys. And we're going to get into that in a second.
Yeah.
Before we get into the last Buzzcocks record, I do want to ask you about in 2000 you released Some Reality, your debut as a solo artist.
Oh yeah.
How did you find that endeavour? Going from playing with one of the greatest punk bands of all time to now starting a solo career and releasing music by yourself.
Well, even though I was still in the Buzzcocks at that point, I was doing that, you know, and it's one of the moments where sometimes the artistic tap comes on its own throne. And one of the reasons was, like, I think by this point, because we did that album Modern, we had a few albums out after Trade Test. There's one called Modern, there's one called The Way. Oh, and the Black album, which we didn't have a title, it was just called Buzzcocks. So we done all them, and I think it was getting hard to get Pete to write. I'd go, look, I've got a cassette with all these songs, where's yours, you know, and
where's your
deadlines. And it was almost like he felt he'd done enough or something, you know. He enjoyed playing live, but it was like pulling teeth trying to get an album with him. But also at the time, I thought, I'll explore different things, and if we're not doing Buzzcocks album, because I used to have somewhere in my house tapes marked, you know, 1991 next Buzzcocks album, and they never saw light of day because it's like, oh, well, I've got mine, where's yours? Oh, right, okay. I'd find them in there and I'd be like, oh, fuck, never used them either, yeah. So maybe I've got bags of tapes in the shed or somewhere. I'll have to have a look. There might have been some good stuff on it. So anyway, I thought, as all writers and good authors do, they have the hit books, and then they backtrack to their life and stuff, you know. So there's some reality is a bit more sort of like rustic, and it was sort of a bit warm and internal and a bit rustic to me, you know. It was my kind of 60s roots coming out a little bit.
Yeah.
And they're different, you know, because you're not doing a Buzzcocks album, you kind of got to do something else, you know. So I thought, this is a new journey. So interesting, because I did Some Reality, like an internal thing. It was kind of intimate as well. It had a bit of an intimate feel to it. I tried to get, you know.
So returning to that sound, because you guys have maintained such a modern, unique sound, so to kind of go back in your roots and explore that retro, I guess, sound must be really, really awesome.
It was, and it was nice for me because I had these really old Wham amps used on it. And we recorded that in about 3 days. We recorded it really quick. I wrote it all in sequence, and the three of us with the bass and drums, and we just did it song by song really quick, and then probably did the vocals. Like we soon heard it, but that was super quick, really. But it's got a vibe, the album, that I thought, wow, we captured that period of time in it, you know.
You captured what you were looking for.
Yeah. And a lot of people that, know the stuff, they love that first one. I wanted it to sound like a first album in its way as well. Not innocence, but a little bit of something there, like this is the beginning of something with this, so I did that.
Exactly, it wasn't like everything blasting at once, but it was a new sound.
Yeah.
And while maintaining that kind of roots, and I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. And then with that, I did. So there's a box set somewhere with this. So the next one was called Serious Contender, which I thought, now we've got the sort of, well, rustic, but that kind of, there's some reality one. Now we get to run. So that was about getting in life's existential boxing ring and looking out, fighting with it, metaphysically getting in life's existential boxing ring. And I called it Serious Contender, to give everybody a bit of hope, all of us, like, let's get in that ring, let's sort this thing called life out and deal with ourselves, And then the one after that became the political one, which is called Air Conditioning. I kept sitting on the back of Van's air conditioning. I thought, it's the political inhalation we're breathing, not like the air conditioning on a wall,
Yeah.
So there's that one. And then I had one called Inner Space Times, which was very internal. I thought that's a bit more psychedelic and dark, because I just thought everybody always looks to presidents and leaders for answers, and I thought back in the old days you used to turn your back on all that, and if they haven't got you there, well, what I used to say in the States is like, you can be the president of your own body. That's the main thing.
And that's really, really awesome.
You don't have to look for them to give you all the answers, because it's too difficult to communicate. But if you're a president of your own body, that's a good place to start,
Exactly, just starting from the ground up.
You've got yourself, you can deal with it,
what I mean? Though, 4 albums, you went through kind of your Innocent debut, the kind of really, really fiery second record, then the political punchy third one, and then the fourth, which was kind of nearly like this full circle. It's really, really awesome. And I really admire that.
Yeah, because what I want to do is take people on the journey. I think it's important if you follow an artist, any artist or band, it's great to go on the whole journey, It's no good. It's like if somebody says, I love that song, Ever Fallen in Love, but like, you bought that in a compilation album, you don't know anything about the band. You might like the fucking song, you might like the song.
Did you listen to it on Love Bites? Did you listen to it in context?
Yeah, well, exactly, that's that,
Yeah.
And the thing that, if you like an artist or, the books and stuff, I like the books as well, but speaking of which, it's like, I had to go Ulysses. I love the idea of James Joyce's Ulysses.
We actually have nearly a Ulysses.
Yes, I know, but it's a James Joyce hotel, isn't it? And, but when you read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, it gives you a background that gives you more of a background to who Joyce was and the Ulysses, He's known for Ulysses, so it's like when I was doing the solo things. But as many authors have read that where they have a hit single or a hit album with the book, and then they always write a book about their life after,
Exactly.
It might not be, which is interesting. And I think it's part of the journey to make different albums that take you on a journey, if you see what I mean. If you're going to be involved in it, it's interesting to go along on that journey. Otherwise, it's pointless making one album and the next one's meaningless towards the next. Or some people might go, I like that album, but I never bought any of the others. It's like, well, you're missing out a little bit.
Exactly. In an era of playlists, the impact of an album has never been more important.
Yeah.
And that's really what I love about albums, is that they express that. And one album that I listened to, and as a Buzzcocks fan, I really loved, because it was a bit different, but again maintaining that Buzzcocks sound was Sonics in the Soul.
Yeah.
But this was very different, especially for you, because you wrote the whole thing. Now, it's not like you were new to writing duties, as you mentioned there, you had tons of cassettes, you wrote a lot of the Buzzcocks songs, but you never wrote a full album. How was it for you to write the full record for the first time and kind of be the creative director nearly of this record?
But I knew it wouldn't be. I mean, towards the end on the last couple of albums, me and Peter worked separately. We would play each other's songs, but you kind of get to that stage. So I knew it wouldn't be a problem for me to write it, but I thought the problem was I've got my mates not there, Peter, the dynamics, you know. And so I think on the last few records, because we had an album called All Set, and I couldn't get back to, the guy wanted me to go back to San Francisco and mix it with him and be involved when we was on tour. And the sequence was like a bunch of Pete songs, one after another at the beginning, and then a lot of my songs at the end, you know. And it's like, hold on a minute, there's something wrong with this record. All the songs are good, but they need to be separate, you know, like
side A and side B can't be that different.
No. Well, we started alternating a Pete song, a Steve song, or two Pete songs, two Steve's. That roller coaster way.
It was kind of more...
It was just like, yeah, that's all the Pete ones, and after that you get the Steve ones. It's like, that didn't make the album. It was like, oh, it's all one thing and then all one thing that way in a sense.
It's hard to get into the market.
So it's just this. I learned a lot about sequencing on that as well. I said, in terms of the Buzzcocks, we've never had this problem until we got to that stage. It was like, I thought, that's what, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with that record. All the songs are good, but you know. So, going back to Sonics in the Soul, I was like, so there's no Pete in now, I've got to kind of bear him in mind. Or maybe I'll do a Steve one, then a Pete type one, and a Steve one and a Pete type one. Something like that, because after all, still got to bring my brother and, you know, like Pete along on the journey somehow, you know, to make it more of a Buzzcocks record. But then, so there was a little bit of that thinking somewhere, but also I started to write them in sequence, which was, I think I was about 4 songs in, I thought, now we need a slow one, you know, the bad news. Now we need one a bit like this. But I was writing them to order, or writing.
Which, well, it wasn't like a roller coaster, it was kind of flowing.
Well, normally we'd have a bunch of songs and put them together to make an album, you know. Now we've got 10, 12 songs. That's the first one, that's it. But with this, I was like about 4 in, and I thought, now I'll write one like this to complement that, the last one. Then I'll write the next one, which was a new experience, you know.
You're making the jigsaw instead of putting it together.
Yeah, well, I thought, it's like reading a book. You have to read the beginning chapters and get to the end chapter for it to make sense.
To complement.
So I tried to make it like a whole journey, like a roller coaster. There's your ticket. You've got to get to the end of the book or the end of the roller coaster before the album makes sense, you know.
Exactly. It's
like a whole trip.
Album and already get the idea of it.
And Sonics in the Soul is like, got that in mind. And I think when you listen to the whole album, you go, I've got it. Fuck it. You know, it's a whole thing, this.
Yeah.
There's one of these, there's one of those, there's one of these. And it never gets the same, and it keeps you on the journey. But I was kind of writing them a bit, I need one of them now. Now I need one of them kind of things. So, as I'm halfway through, I got this moment of emotional moment, because it was during lockdown and stuff. And I thought I had about 4 songs. I thought these are good and all this kind of thing. And then somehow I had this flashback. I thought there's no Pete anymore. You know, it was a little meltdown moment for me. Really, I was a bit like, fuck, there's no Pete. You know. And I had a flashback to when we first started with me, Pete Howard, and John Moore in Howard's little bedsit, the very first rehearsal. And I thought, I'll never have that again in my life, you know. What a magic moment that was, you know. And I just thought, I'm going to take I'll take some of that memory with me. I thought that'll never happen ever again, you know, not with Howard, John, or, you know, all of us, and no Pete, because it. And so I come up, I was so working it in the middle of the night, that song Sense Out of Control. But I thought I'll make it like early Buzzcocks. So that's got a bit of a flavour of like, as if it could be on Spiral Scratch, a bit tinny.
And it's very, very like upfront. And for the first song to hear, like, especially for someone like me, who, as I mentioned earlier, was into like another music in a different kitchen. You guys were bringing a different sound in that record, so it was so much more accessible for me to hear early Buzzcocks before I was thrown into something completely different.
Yeah.
And it's actually my favourite track on the record.
Right.
It's hard to pick one because it's really, really interesting, you know, the songs that you guys
It sounds like an early Buzzcocks record, you know, so I thought we've got to have one of them, and then there's all the other stuff, you know. The Chuggy one, Bad Dream, could be a little bit like, what do we say, Something Goes Wrong. Because when the Chuggy, you know, there was always a Buzzcocks chug on quite a few records, on like on Autonomy, Something Goes Wrong Again, and all that.
Yeah.
So I thought we've got to have a chug on this album, and the Bad Dreams, you know, the chug, the thing. But then there's other moments as well on there. So I'm really pleased with that record, and in fact I've just finished doing the other one.
Really?
Yeah, I mean it's all recorded. When I go back from this tour, we've got about 4 weeks, so I'll be back in the studio in a few days to. Got to mix it all and all that stuff, and maybe put a riff on it too or something like that. But it's all there ready to go.
So could there be new Buzzcocks music in 2025?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really exciting.
Hoping to get it out this year. I mean, it will be ready in like a few months. You know, it's only a matter of mixing it and pressing it. It's whether the record label goes like, oh, you know, you can't release it till then. I mean, that's up to them when they want to, you know. But yeah.
It's going to be there.
Yeah.
You heard it here, guys.
Yeah.
New Buzzcocks music.
Yeah, I've not really told anybody yet about that, you know, not in time. But so.
I know you mentioned in an interview with Mojo last year you were writing it actually.
Yeah, actually you phoned me up doing that. Yeah, and but I had written some stuff then, but then we went on a world tour, and it was like okay. And the record company going, what's happening to the album? And we was in like America and was everything. It's like, can't get back to it, you know. And even I wanted to finish it or get on with it. I was like, there's no time. Every time we come back, we're going somewhere. But maybe the time is right for it now, you know. And as with all these things, I've got a couple of last minute goals at the end where I added a few. Just the manager said, we put the studios. He's going in to do 10. Of course, I went in with 14 by the end, you know.
Yeah.
I'm going this one experimental track at the end. How's it go? Don't worry how it goes. We'll sort it out as we're doing it.
It'll be in there.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
So there's one of them. I thought you got to have that sort of Buzzcocks mentality. And a few others like that. So it's ended up with 14, really. But yeah, so that's...
It's really, really awesome.
I think it's important that, you like I say, carry on the journey, you know. I always said I just don't want to be a greatest hits band going, do you remember all these? And doing them every night. I'm happy to play them. Well, I think, but the fans that follow would like with new music, you know.
You don't want to be playing the greatest hits, you want to be making the greatest
hits. Yeah, absolutely, Yeah, want to create the future, not the past, you know. And if you're just doing the greatest hits, you're trying to recreate the past, whereas I want to recreate the future as well.
Exactly, and that's.
And I think most people that like the band are in for the journey of it. And here's a weird one. I mean, even if you make the worst album in the world, at least you're having to go moving forward because you've got all the other stuff. But I know this album's going to be as good as Sonic's in the Soul in a different way. That's the thing. It's like, let's not do Sonic's in the Soul Part 2. Let's have some other bits in there,
Exactly, and that's what's really, really cool about the Buzzcocks mentality. And then about Sonic's in the Soul, as well as stepping behind writing, you also were on production duties. You weren't new to production, but you were co-producing on this record. How did you find then kind of polishing off the album and getting it ready to put it out? Did you find that you had much control over kind of what you wanted it to sound like, or did it really make a difference at all?
Well, it did. Been in studios, and we had, Martin Hannett produced the first Spiral Scotch, but Martin Russian, he produced all the main stuff in the days. So seeing how he works, and worked with Bill Laswell in America that did public image stuff and a lot of other things, and people like that. But also having to spend all that time in the studio, and you learn how the boxes work and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the buttons and the numbers of this and that. Some people get involved with all that kind of thing. I know what it's all about, but Michelangelo didn't paint the Sistine Chapel, He got other people to paint it. He just said, I want this and that, that kind. But so it was really easy. I mean, for Sonics in the Soul, we tried to get this guy Dave I'd worked with. We put a single out when Pete died. I said, I'm not going on the road unless we've got new product. So we put a single out, got to get better than Destination Zero. And that felt like, that justifies us. So this guy Dave produced that. Then he had a lot of problems about 3 people in his family died. So it was like, okay, Dave, we can't do it. Then we got this other guy, Harvey, who did Serious Contender. And he moved to Australia. He said, I'm looking forward to doing the album in the next week. So the manager said to me, why don't you do it with Loz, who owns the studio, but also he was the engineer on it, Loz. So I was like, that's a good idea, can't be asking other people now. And so it was a great transition. So Loz knows how to press all the buttons. And I'm like, we need a bit of this, we need a bit of that. And so we kind of work together. So it's kind of, my stage in life of it, it's like, rather than having to keep talking to a producer, I want it to sound like this and that, I'm just saying, look, let's just do this and do that. And
this is what I like.
So, yeah. So you kind of cut out the middleman,
Yeah.
When you first start in the studio and you don't know what's going on. But I've been around studios a long time, around the world, So.
You knew what you were doing and you knew what you wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of like, with Sonics and Soul, the reason why it's so cool.
Yeah.
Because you got you behind the writing, you got to have the creative drive behind it with production as well.
There was a kind of purity on that production. It was like, look, never mind all this and that. We sent it away from mastering 3 times to somebody. Actually, I went down to the guy's house in Devon, so it was some weird thing. And he kept sending these things back. Normally you're there, but he lived a long way, so I nipped down for it. And no, it's not right, that, He's going, look, I don't want this. No, that's not right. We know what we want. We want it to sound like it did in the studio. Because when you master it, you can enhance a lot of other things, And so it was good to keep a control on that one. Wanted it to sound like how we recorded it and mix it in the studio,
Yeah.
All the extra enhancement on all this, that and the other, So it was great, and it was trouble-free, that. I mean, to be honest, the bass player and drummer did the bits, did the great backing, and then they said, I've got to go and do this, and I'm doing that. So I said, all right, leave it to me, I'll do the guitars and the vocals. And it was a good way of working, and that's exactly what we've done this time,
That's really
So, nobody knows I'm a producer, but I could produce it, what I mean? But it's not really my forte, but producing your own for the necessity of it, it's quite good fun,
And that's really the best thing that you guys could have done for the record.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
it.
I'd love to, before we get into my final question,
Right.
I'd love to ask you about, you wrote a book, as we've been mentioning, we've been linking up to authors James Joyce here behind us, but Autonomy, Portrait of a Buzzcock.
Yeah.
How did you find kind of getting everything you did and trying to trace back to the first early days in your childhood to put into the book? Was it difficult, or was it all coming naturally? And how did you find writing your first book?
I did it with another guy, this guy called Simon Goddard, that's written a lot of books. So we'd have meetings and talk through things, Actually, we'd have a lot of Guinness. He'd ask me the questions, I'd tell him. So I did start to write a book years ago, but when you're on the road, it takes a long time to sort it out. So he'd kind of interview me, and then he'd write it up, So we did it that way,
Yeah.
But you know, there's still lots of stories not in there yet, you know, but, you know, it's been a long and eventful life. So, but, so we got it done that way, and we kind of did it over a year, you know. It's like, I'd leave it to him sometimes to sort of ask me the question, you know, well, what happened then? And then he kind of wind me up, and it's like, oh yeah, it was this and that. And so we did it all like that, really, you know.
Just kind of taking something, working with it to make the incredible book.
Yeah. Wanted it, well, he said it should be about your life, you know. We know you did Top of the Pops, or you did this and all that, you know. It's like, kind of like, you should let people know where your music come from, coming from the streets, or, you know, that's where, all this kind of thing, and the insight into what you had as to how this Buzzcocks music came up.
How music worked for you.
Yeah. So it's more about that than you know, what the music's involved in it, but it's kind of like this is the life story one, really.
And that's what I love about books, kind of getting into the mind of the person, and learning nearly about it. I'm listening to an audiobook actually at the moment called In One Ear by Simon Raymond, and link to the interview with Simon Raymond will be down below. But that was really, really cool, because hearing him speak from his point of view and not hearing or reading a Wikipedia article or reading an interview that might have been changed up with different information, to hear it from him and that organic material, it can't be beaten by anything else.
It's fascinating where it comes from, and like you're saying, the person behind it's like that. I mean, I must have said, the Buzzcocks Wikipedia is a complete waste of time. I tried to change it many years ago, a couple of things that are wrong right at the beginning, and it's like some guy on Wikipedia is going, my dad, you know, wrote books, don't you tell me, but I'm Steve Diggle, that's my life. And they're telling me, like, you know, you go.
It's an interesting website, Wikipedia.
But that's the wrong story, yeah. I think, well, they don't even say, they've got a thing of fast cars, and it doesn't even say I wrote it on it, you know, stuff like that.
I'm glad you're a fan, but just don't edit the Wikipedia.
Yeah. I've never looked at it, you know. I've been playing bass for about a million years. I did 10 shows on the bass when we started, moved out a guitar. You have to read about, you know, 5,000 words before you get to me, or whatever. But there's a lot of misinformation on it. But you better read in the book. It's good to have the book with a voice.
It's great to have the book as well. Especially for, like, and I'm going to say this as an interviewer, it's great to have those kind of organic interviews and books to get the information, because for me researching, I do a lot of my research by myself, so it's very, very difficult to find information because you might have misinformation or a bias, so it's really, really cool to hear that.
I do sympathise with that, because some journalists or radio stations do, and you can see they've got it off Wikipedia or someone else, you know.
Yeah, it's a copy and
you're
paste
going like,
job.
So I have to like reverse them and kind of go, well, you know, I know you said that, but it's this really, you know. You think you've done your research, and it's not always their fault, like you said. There's all kinds of things out there.
Like I use Wikipedia sometimes, but even that, you have to be careful because you don't know is it true or not, and that's why you have to always fact check these things as a researcher.
Well, I'm hoping at some point, I think one of my own doing one called Songwriter or something, like a book of the lyrics and the stories behind them, and maybe the stories relating to your life, how you got there with this and all that. Not just a simple book of lyrics, you know. I think it's got to be an interesting angle on like how this song came about, you know.
You need to capture the magic.
The magic. And there was a lot of thinking behind those songs, you know, for me personally, whenever it's... And then you forget, when you're on to the next song, says, I've actually written about 80 songs for Buzzcocks, but we have been around, and now it's been more with this new album, but and about 100 songs for the other. I didn't know that, so I was writing out the lyrics by hand over a few years, because, and I thought, there's a lot of songs here, you don't realise how many you wrote, but over a period of God knows how many years, it's not as many as, you know, but that's a lot. But I thought it'd be nice to perhaps do something like that at some point but make it an interesting kind of thing rather than just here's the book of lyrics or here's the songs. Somehow pertaining to your life and how you got there, you know. I mean, there's that song White Years Ago from a chain store. And when I was at school, they were saying about Bernstein's language barrier, which particularly in those early days, like 1970 or 1960, Bernstein's language barrier, the language spoken at home is different from the classroom.
Yeah.
So if you come from a working class family and all you're hearing is like, you know, expletives or basic language, and you know, you go to school and somebody says ubiquitous, you're kind of spellblind, you know, spellbound, and then you underachieve because you don't understand the language. So it was all right. When I saw him once years ago from a chain store, it was asking how does the girl get to be a chain store, using it as a political vehicle and all that at that time. But it's not a great policy, but facing Bernstein's barrier, waiting for someone to marry her. But I thought if I can kind of put that in as a little gem on that one, so somebody goes, what's Bernstein's language barrier? And if you're in that situation, well, that's why, you know, particularly all those years ago, I think we're perhaps a bit more advanced with all that now. But in that time, that was an important little gem to put in, you know.
And that's
another thing.
Really awesome. And people don't know about that.
No.
That's why the book's really important to a lot of fans.
Yeah.
Because they might have loved the song and then they read, oh, this is the background behind it, the context, why it was written, when it was written. All that kind of thing makes such a difference to a song and can change your opinion on it. And most of the time for the better, especially in Buzzcocks' case.
Well, like you say, that little story, it's nice to pass on, and like they wouldn't know, they just always talking about something in the song, but when you know it's that, it's just a little gem to go, oh,
it brings
add something to it,
to the table.
So I'd like to do that if I could, you know, with some of the other ones, there's lots of bits and pieces and little things along the way, you know.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited to see that with new music and also look into that with the old music. And my final question for you is, avid music fan, obviously you are a musician, you know what you're talking about regarding music. So I want to ask you, what have you been listening to recently that you are kind of like, you'd like to recommend to the listener, that you just think is really, really awesome? Does it matter when it came out or who it's by? Just...
Well, it's a bit weird, this one, but it's I saw on the Instagram these three girls called the Costellos, and they're like a kind of real country and western group. But it's three girls and the three sisters, and they've got these amazing harmonies, you know. And I don't know why it keeps coming up on my Instagram, but when I hear them, I think that's that real, you know, American country thing, and they're young girls and the three sisters singing them together, you know. And so when I hear that, I think, wow, what great harmonies they've got, you know.
Yeah.
What's also great now, I think it's a groundswell of a lot more guitar bands around. You know, a few years ago, there weren't that many guitar bands about, but over the last few years, you see people picking up guitar and coming back, you know.
Yeah.
But even with that, I wish they'd get a bit more definite with their sound and what they're doing, you know, instead of just sounding like somebody else, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Sometimes, you know, you can take them influences, but don't just ape them influences, you know what I mean? That's the thing.
And twisting them.
And twist them a bit of identity.
Like music scene today.
You sometimes see some and you're thinking like, you know, they're a bit like farm animals. They haven't got the consciousness. They can play, but you know, it's like I don't think they know what they're doing properly.
Some people can play really well and don't have the creativity. Other people are really creative but can't play.
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, there's great musicians out there, but it's one thing to play well, but it's something to have something individual or something different about it, you know. And I think that's very important. It gives you identity, you know. I mean, it gives you something there, you know.
And that's what's really awesome.
Yeah.
And as well with Buzzcocks, you guys are taking classic sound and always changing, always building and progressing while maintaining the past sounds.
Yeah, I think keeping that thread, because we've got them sort of distorted sonic guitars. We've always had that there, so keeping that. But also keeping every song different, you know.
Yeah.
As much as I love the Ramones, the first album's great. By the time you get the fourth one, they're all the same.
Yeah.
We do love them for that, but that's not my...
We're not knocking the Ramones,
no,
but...
the Ramones came to see us when we first went to New York, and they said exactly what we're talking about. You guys take it to other places, you know, and all that kind of stuff. That was a great honour for them, you know. They didn't need to, but we did. That's a bit diplomatic. But you know, another great one was Why Can't I Touch It, you know.
Oh, that was so interesting with the bass, the really iconic bass line with an experimental kind of really high pitched guitar in the background. So different. And where we mentioned earlier, you brought the melody.
Yeah.
And that's like one of my favourite Buzzcocks songs because it's so enveloping.
Yeah, because you think of the Buzzcocks and them fast songs with the catchy tunes, and then there's that one. Which
6-minute slow song that has really kind of impactful musicianship.
I have not sang the chorus of that live on this tour or the other ones because the audience sing it now. They never used to years ago. I think it's been a few films or something. But I was out in America with touring, and I was like singing the verse, you know, feels so real, all this kind of stuff. So, and then they all sang it, so they've been doing it. It's become like a tradition now. Every night people sing it, you know.
Fantastic.
Never used to happen. But with that one, that started off with a chord. That ding, ding, ding. I went into the rehearsal studio and I said, we need a groovy song. I started playing that, and then that bell thing, and it ends on a ding, 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 ding. And then Steve Garvey and John Martin, and he put a great line to it, yeah.
Exactly, and that's what kind of built to the song that
But it came from that guitar chord first, and then he put, without that he couldn't put, you know, it was my groove. Pete was late, so by this time we're doing a ding, 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 ding.
That's just like
and he was late. Well, we wait for him to come because, you know, it was supposed to be a rehearsal. So it was good he was late because I showed the others that and we got that together. Wasn't even going to be a song really or whatever. And then he started singing some words, Why Can't I Touch It? So that haphazardness was great. It was like...
And that's what makes it such a great song.
It's amazing, yeah.
That is so organic and came out.
It is, yeah. And I kind of, you know, I love that one. A lot of people do, you know, it's kind of like, that's still the Buzzcocks, you know.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell it's still the Buzzcocks. Even though sometimes people think, oh, I thought the Buzzcocks ever fallen over, harmony in my head, or promises, or what do I? It's like, no, there's this one.
This
Yeah. So that's nice, yeah.
It must be pretty confusing. Like for me, who has the whole catalogue, I understand Buzzcocks pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But for someone who like bought the first record, they're kind of going, wait, I thought this was, this is...
Yeah.
They're kind of like going, wait, which one is it? But Buzzcocks is a lot of things, and it kind of blends that in such a great way. I think...
Yeah, it'd be nice to somehow crystallise all that and go, like we're talking about, that it's a journey, and you put them all together, it makes sense, or there's a thread of it going through, you know, which I think is very important, and it's nice. But like you say, you can meet Buzzcocks people from different eras that don't know the other. Oh, did you have an album out years ago? Did you have that one?
There's always stuff.
There's a lot getting it, but yeah. We need to let them know more sometimes, yeah.
Exactly, and if you, listener, want to listen to any of the fantastic Buzzcocks music out there, it will be linked in the description. But overall, I just want to thank you so much, Steve, for joining me. We've had a great conversation, and it's been great to have you here.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. It's nice to have such an